Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if one person has their moon in Aquarius and one person has their moon in Cancer. And it's really important to note that there are other factors that will greatly modify this sometimes. You definitely have to look at the sun signs of the two people involved. But I still think that looking at this dynamic can provide some insight, maybe some chuckles, because this is a very different way of navigating one's emotions for sure. When somebody has the moon in Aquarius, I don't really care what sun sign it is, but this is an example of, like, let's say their sun sign is Scorpio, like a water sign like Scorpio. They're going to be different because they already have this orientation that is more emotional. But the moon can represent how a person is mothered. So, if we talk about mommy issues, if there are negative, I don't know, remnants or kind of results of having been mothered in a certain way, this can show up. And the person, this is the ironic part, is the person may kind of mimic that treatment in how they treat other people. So they're kind of like passing it on in some cases. So an example of the moon in Aquarius is that this can indicate sudden shifts in how a person relates to their partner. And an example is John Lennon, who had the sun in Libra, another air sign, and the moon in Aquarius, and he could shut down. He had a girlfriend for a while named May Pang, and she would observe how he could do that. Like, he would go back to Yoko, and there was this ability to kind of just almost, it might seem kind of even cold. And what I feel is going on with that type of thing on a psychological level is that the person fears getting close to someone, and so it's like they shut it off. And it could be because they had a mother who maybe nurtured them and then would just go completely cold. And so they fear somebody doing that to them. So they're kind of like afraid of intimacy for that reason. They don't trust, they have trust issues. But also because Aquarius is an air sign, and air signs do not like really strong or intense emotions. So in love, you might even have an Aquarius person who's quite dry, who doesn't really get all ooey gooey about their loved one. I mean, I have the moon in Virgo, and I can be that way too. The earth signs, the moon earth signs can be that way. So it's important for other people to understand, that it's kind of a sappy term, but not light language. That's a totally different thing. Love language. In other words, I'm assuming it means how a person shows that they love another person. And I think there's some truth to that, because a person with the moon in Aquarius might be really in their head, and they may not have that quality that is super romantic and like just saying, oh, I just love you forever, or just saying I love you every day. They might kind of cringe at that because it just seems so sappy, or they don't want to get that close to that person, even if they care for them quite a bit. And then you have somebody who's like, moon is in Cancer. I'm picking the oddball combinations because they're fun to do, because they're just so out there. And the person, first of all, the moon rules Cancer. So this type of, a sign like Cancer, like, specializes in emotions. But this is a combination of emotional extremes, because somebody with the moon in Cancer can wear their heart on their sleeve. They can be very moody. they can be crabby, Cancer is the crab. So if they wake up on the wrong side of the bed, they might be very irritable and they just aren't very pleasant. And then sometimes they can be kind of silly. There's almost, that word lunatic comes from Luna or the moon. So it is possible that there is something about that is very almost irrational or goofy. But this person is definitely a feeling type of person. If this person has a sun in Aquarius, and this might be where the two people, or any kind of air sign as the sun sign, this might be why the two people are attracted to one another, despite these like weird moon combinations. That can be because they do have that in common with one another, but that can still make that person very emotional. They just may be like, why am I like this? And they may reject that side of themselves. The person may have come from a background where they were babied by their mother, that they were treated. So if this is a man, this can be a mama's boy, but this is going to be like, please forgive me if you're a man with this combination. I was going to say a psychotic mama's boy. What I mean by that is that the sun in Aquarius is going to definitely mean that you blow hot and cold. This combination blows hot and cold. I'm talking about if you happen to have a sun sign that's air and a moon in Cancer, you're going to blow hot and cold, and that could be crazy making for a partner or potential partner. So a person who has the sun, sometimes you could even say an earth element, which can be dry, and the moon in Cancer, they have to honor their emotions. Even if their emotions are excessive, they have to find a way to integrate their emotions into their core personality, because it's part of it, for sure. It's the moon. It's definitely a part of it. To be able to be well balanced. Otherwise, what will happen is, it's almost, to me, the moon is like the shadow self. So I interpret the moon signs as more of the shadow side of whatever that sign is. Well, in other words, if we were being simplistic, we'd say the negative attributes of a particular sign. So what are the negative, I would say, challenging attributes of Cancer? Being clingy emotionally. So excessive need for reassurance, and in relationships, be the other person's presence, like being kind of emotionally needy in general, being a martyr, like poor me, I always have to do everything. When I was growing up, I never had this, I never had that. I am a victim, or I would say that would be more the moon in Pisces, but with the moon in Cancer, I am always doing for other people, and they never appreciate it. Wah, 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 that kind of thing. And what else? Just this being dominated by the emotions, which can be like kind of tyrannical, really. It's like emotional tyranny within yourself. You don't want that, because your emotions can be like your conditioning, and that you can change how you choose to react to life. But some people are very reactive, and they tend to, other people feel like they have to walk on eggshells, or they will upset that person. They will offend that person, and that certainly could be the moon in Cancer. With this combination, the person with the moon in Cancer could be looking at the person with the moon in Aquarius and saying, you're such, at the extreme, they might say you're sadistic, You have no feelings. You're like the King of Swords. You're so cold. You're as cold as ice. That song by Foreign Earth. You're as cold as ice. And the person who is the moon in Aquarius is like, you're a crybaby. You're like totally emotionally, you're too emotionally demanding, you're not emotionally independent. So how can these two signs get along and not really feel like the other one is somehow punishing them or trying to control them emotionally, either through neglect or through kind of manipulation? Well, that's going to be by really understanding that people have different ways of showing that they care. I think the most difficult types of the challenges can be with people who have a tendency to have expectations that other people behave in a certain way that is familiar to them and that they can't see beyond that. So if one or both parties is very stubborn and narrow-minded, that's going to make it so much harder for them to see eye to eye. I do feel that both of these signs has intuitive abilities, so it is possible that they'll be able to transcend their emotional conditioning to be able to see that the other person means well, and then maybe also to communicate what your needs are that are so different from that other person, so that they don't have to mind read, so that you can let them know that, the moon can be the way that we feel safe too. And for an Aquarius person, they can feel threatened if somebody is coming on too strong and kind of making them responsible for their feelings. And so the Aquarius moon sign person can help the Cancer moon sign person to develop more detachment, and not just detachment where the emotions don't control, but also less subjectivity, because the feminine signs are the water and earth signs, and they tend to be more subjective. And with water, we could say emotionally subjective, meaning that, okay, someone that you like tells you that they want to stop dating, and you make it about yourself. They must not think I'm good enough. This is the story of my life. I've always been rejected. I'm always going to be rejected. Being more detached would be like, oh, wow, okay, they said that. They're not ready to get serious. Okay, I'm glad that they told me that when I'm not totally into the relationship, and now I can let them, be free. And maybe they need more time, because I don't want to be with somebody that's going to half-ass it in terms of like whether or not, like, usually people with the moon in Cancer, they want commitment pretty quickly early on if they like someone, and that can be something that the person with the moon in Cancer has to avoid, because that can make people run for the hills. Even people who tend to be very dedicated in relationships, if somebody is kind of saying, hey, what do you think about marriage? And, you've been dating for 3 months, the other person may be like, damn, okay, where's the exit door? Because I can't handle this. This is way too much too soon. So learning how to have emotional restraint, and that involves not taking everything personally. Even when it's a personal matter, doesn't mean that it's reflecting bad on you. For the person who is the moon in Aquarius, learning how their remote qualities, how they negatively impact other people, and not just thinking that these people are crazy. because, learning how sometimes you may feel that sense of like wanting to ghost somebody because it's easier than, talking to them face to face and saying, look, I'm not ready to be in a relationship, or I want out of this relationship. It's easier just to like block them, stop taking their calls, whatever. But that can be very, that can feel traumatic to somebody if they've felt like they had an emotional connection to you. So learning how not to fear your emotions, to warm up to your emotions to the point where you allow yourself to feel. Maybe it takes, like for me, it can take certain music. And I jokingly call it like shadow work, like listening to, I was listening to the Smiths and Morrissey in the last year or so. And I hadn't been listening for a long time. And that was kind of like my emo music back in the day in the mid 80s when I was in my late teens. And so I was saying, you know what? I think listening to the Smiths is like shadow work. And so, and I'm not really even joking, but I think it's funny. But I'm not saying like, I don't believe in like, listening to like music that's completely depressing or anything like that. But I'm saying music that moves you in some way. And that can get you into your heart chakra if your heart, open up your heart chakra. And that might be something that you need. Maybe you need to have a good cry. Maybe you've been really repressed that way. And that can allow yourself to feel more and to understand where other people are coming from. Alrighty then, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a reading, I say love, I was saying relationship reading, but it can be for singles, or just like a natal chart interpretation or any other type of reading. The link is below for more information. Thanks for listening. Bye.